All right. Peace and greetings. This video has been stewing in me probably for a while. I don't know what sparked it. Probably just the fact that I got good sleep over the past couple days, despite that. Looks like I have some rings under my eyes. I'm actually doing a detox, so sometimes things come out while you're doing a detox. That's not what this video is about. Okay. And I'm sitting here with some of my karate belts on my shoulder and around my neck for a purpose. I'll probably put this video up on my martial scientist channel, which I really am not doing a lot to develop, but nonetheless, it's there. Um, or it just may be a wisdom note, but I had to get this out, so I had to put it on video. And this one I'm actually thinking about posting. That's why all the imagery. Okay, and I wrote down a few notes because I have a lot. Trying to keep it concise, try to keep it coherent, but sometimes the mental Rolodex spit out what they spit out when it comes up. Okay, so why am I having this video? Primarily because it's been brewing for a long time, but it just came to a crescendo that people are bashing karate and bashing classical and basic martial arts, that it doesn't work, and when you're in a real fight you're not going to be able to think about those small techniques, and your breathing's going to be heavy, and your mind's going to go and you're going to think about running and blah 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 blah. And so they have a point in terms of what happens to the body in a fight or when you're faced with danger. However, the point they're making about what happens to your body in those situations and why you can't apply your karate, they're totally wrong. I'll say that again. The point they're making about you not being able to apply pressure point techniques and calm head and movements while being attacked with a knife or multiple attack, or even just somebody bigger than you or surprising you, and not being able to apply your karate, they're missing a basic factor, so they're totally wrong. And that's what I want to go into. Why are they totally wrong? I'll start here. I've walked by a few karate schools, even in the past years when I used to live in Yonkers, and now here where I'm at, I see karate schools, and I walk by and I look because I see children learning, and I love to see children learning karate. And it saddens me because the instructors are not teaching karate. They're teaching karate moves. And even the karate moves they're showing, they're just that. They might as well be choreographing a movie. There is no technique. They're not balanced. The punches and kicks they're throwing, and the instructor looks just like the kids. That even if they weren't fighting anyone, and they threw 2 or 3 kicks like that, they'd fall over. Most of the time they do. Even if they're not going full speed, there's no balance. They're falling over. The instructors can barely keep their balance and do it at a slow pace. So what's the point? Point to the original thing I said. The reason why you're seeing karate not working in situations of real attack, because people have not trained and studied karate. It's not, I don't know, what can I think of? It's not checkers, right? It's not spades. It's not something you can learn in a couple of hours, a couple of days, play with a few people, and you get good. It doesn't work that way. The best way I've been able to describe it is karate is like ballet. It takes specific training, specific body abilities and strength and limberness and looseness and focus and breathing and years sometimes of practice to get the most simplest moves correct. Everybody can't do it. It's not for everybody. But commercialism of karate has sold the idea that if you learn the move, you can get a black belt. And what happens is, at best, people become healthy because they do a lot of exercise and they become limber and flexible, and they can choreograph very well. But then that's not karate. I think people following the movies led them away from karate. That doesn't mean that the instructors had to follow. So I don't give them a pass. But most movies where martial arts being demonstrated, people cheer when the guy does a backflip, or he spins over, or he does a kick so high that you have to be a ballerina to do, right? Or he jumps up and kicks two people at the same time. And that's become, wow, that's martial art. That's movies. Looks good. I enjoy it. Hey, I love watching Van Damme. But Van Damme, to his credit, in a video I saw probably about a year or so ago, he was on stage and the guy challenged him because he was trying to say he's like a movie guy. And Van Damme said, and the guy, I think he actually caught Van Damme with a kick, like, because he didn't know he was going to be demonstrating something. He caught him with a punch or whatever, and Van Damme said, okay. He said, I get it. He said, but there's a difference between, this is Van Damme. He said, there's a difference between movie and real martial arts. So let's say we're going to fight. The guy goes, okay. He kicks him. Boom. Just like that. In his stomach. He goes, oh, he goes, that's real combat. There's no setup. There's no, okay, let's start. There's no, I wasn't ready. He let him know that he knows the difference between real martial arts and what he does in the movies. And that's what, because of commercialism, and fortunately or unfortunately, it helped karate grow. I'm trying to demonstrate this belt. I like this writing. Little, I digress. But this reason why I have this belt over here, like I said, the Rolodex bring up what they bring up. So my attention keeps going here. So maybe I'm bringing your attention here. So I'm going to deal with it. These belts I have around my neck came from one particular school, my last school that I was trained with, and I dare say probably my favorite sensei. I love all my senseis. I love them from the bottom of my heart. They're like fathers, brothers, family members. But this sensei, I think I grew the most with, and so I appreciate him for that. And his name is Luis Morales. I still endearingly call him sensei, but his proper title now is Henshi, which means an exalted type of instructor, a model instructor, a master, if you will. All right? And the style that it comes from is Okinawan Goju-ryu. I don't want to digress too much into that, but that's why I wear these, because they came from one school. This came from a period of time when I trained with another really great martial artist and master, and his name is Tadashi Nakamura. Tadashi Nakamura. Forgive me for the mispronunciation. What I love about Tadashi Nakamura, besides his karate, and besides, again, if you study Tadashi Nakamura and watch the films and vision, then you'll see real karate. But anyway, he wrote a book called The Human Face of Karate. I suggest you go out and buy it. The point is, Tadashi Nakamura has a very big heart, right? But he's also a traditional, very disciplined martial artist. And all that to say that I got a blue belt in his style before I moved on, and eventually moved on to Okinawan Goju-ryu with Luis Morales. Okay, sorry for digressing there, but my attention keeps going here because I want to keep it on my shoulder because I like the way it looks and I want to keep it in the thing. Okay, so back to what I was saying about the training, right? It's like ballet. It's not for everybody. Not everybody can do it. So you take a ballet class, or you take a jazz dance class, or you take an African dance class, and you learn to do the moves. But some of the moves you can't do. So you won't ever be at the echelon of what they call a true African dancer. You'll never achieve what it is to be a real freeform jazz dancer. You'll never be a ballerina. The levels below, you may achieve some greatness. You may find an effective way to then dance. That can be appreciated and very effective, but you won't be a ballerina. And that's the key to understanding karate. It is specific. That's why I say what I teach is martial science. Because before it becomes a true art form, you have to understand the science. What makes it work? It has nothing to do with just the style. Doesn't have to do with the situation you may or may not find yourself in. It does have to do with your age and conditioning, because that is incorporated in the science. That's why I end up with Luis Morales. I studied Japanese Goju, became a black belt. I studied under Professor Moses Powell, became a black belt. Prior to that, I studied Wushu Kung Fu, Wing Chun Kung Fu, and a few other mixed styles of Aikido and Jiu-Jitsu. Back then, I didn't care about belts. Still don't really care, to be honest with you. But they're good because they're in the right schools. They show actual completion, right? So they're good when they're applied correctly. But I didn't care about belts. I just cared about learning the science. Okay. But the point I'm making, that I think I might have lost for a minute, is that why I came to Luis Morales. I had been away from training for a while. I continued to train on my, but I hadn't been in a school. I said, okay, it's time for me to get back and really train with a school. But I was, even back then, and this was like about 30 years ago, I was dismayed with what I saw. So I started reading and studying martial arts again, just from a perspective of scientific study and philosophy. And I learned that Okinawan Goju-Ryu recognized that what we call karate is origins probably, if you really trace like what sources it came from, was probably out of Africa. Because there are hieroglyphs on the walls of Egypt, properly called kemet, where the men in karate stances. And we know that the monk that came to India that eventually led to the Shaolin Temple came out of Africa. So it makes sense that it spread, and Okinawan Goju-Ryu recognizes this. That even though the island of Okinawa was very small, it was rich in martial arts because it was a port. And so you had many cultures coming through and many forms of martial art coming through. And they attribute much of what you see in Okinawan Goju originating in Africa. And when I read that, I said, wow, I think I'm going to look into this. So I started looking for Okinawan Goju-Ryu schools. And I viewed about 2 or 3. And the techniques look good, but the senseis, they seem to have a commercial attitude and or I'll say that, a commercial attitude. And then I audited or watched Luis Morales' classes. And I was impressed with how hard they train, right? My best friend and a brother to me, Kato, he got me into Japanese Goju just because of the way they trained under Fred Miller. I was at that point really seeking Kung Fu and training as much as I can with Kung Fu. But the Kung Fu schools at that time were very clannish and close-knit. They really wouldn't teach you anything valuable. So he said, Todd, like, if you really want to train, man, you got to come to school. And that's the way they balls to wall. They trained. So anyway, time passes and I'm looking for a school and I observed his school and I watched how they sweat and they train. And he was right there with him, every push-up, every punch. And at the end of class, he said something that always impressed me. He said, raise your hand over your head, high. Feel the back of your gi. Feel it really good. You feel sweat? People nodding their head. Yeah, you're sweating? Good. That's all you get from karate. What you put in. Thank you for your sweat. Us! And I said, damn! Excuse me, I feel like my nose is running. I was like, what? So I watched a few more times. And finally, I was convinced that he was for real. And I introduced myself, and the rest is history. Okay, well, what's my point? Back to my original point. The reason why karate doesn't work in a combat situation and why you have to have terms like combat karate, because the basics. Let's talk about one thing that I've seen that keeps coming up. Your breathing becomes erratic and your heart starts pumping and you... Raise your hand if you've heard of the kata called Sanchin. Raise your hand if you've heard of the kata called Tensho. Now, Sanchin, probably one of the most basic katas in Okinawan Goju-Ryu, is a breathing kata. It's taught from day one. However, it's considered to be an advanced kata. So is Tensho. But even though it's an advanced kata, it's so important that it's taught from day one. And I'll say it again, it's a breathing kata. What else do you learn to do when you first come into a real traditional karate school? At the beginning, usually somewhere in the middle, and at the end, you sit in a seated position, usually sitting back on your legs. You put your hands on your thighs in some fashion. Close your eyes, and the sensei says, Mutsu! Which means meditate. Calm yourself. Root yourself in the moment. It's kind of like what Will Smith talks about in the movie After Earth. Root yourself in this present moment. Feel your breathing. Feel your body. Feel the ground. Come into present time. What does that do? That puts you in control of your heart rate and your breathing and your adrenaline. Right? Talk to any boxer. Talk to any performer. Yeah, you have jitters before you play that first note, or football player before that first hit. But after that, the training takes over and you're relaxed. You might as well be sitting in your living room. You're getting punched, but you're like, okay, I'm in a fight. Guys are tackling you that weigh 200 some odd pounds, but I'm a football player. You're playing on a stage in front of thousands. I have a family member, Ralph Rowe, who talks about playing drums with Sheik and the adrenaline and the energy that hits him when he's playing, but he don't miss a beat because of the training, because of the mastering of your art, the science. So these things that fail people in executing their karate techniques when they're put in a situation only shows that they were never taught the science of karate. The basics. If you're studying karate and you don't know how to breathe and you don't know how to fight when you're getting hit, you're not studying karate. Again, my friend Kato and I used to talk about the difference between karate and boxing, because he became a professional boxer, a successful one, by the way. And I've always said, and I had to learn this from his experience with boxing, that if you take the training of a martial artist, even a traditional martial artist, the first 3 to 6 months, and you take the training of a boxer the first 3 or 6 months, there's no comparison. The boxer will clean the clock of any martial artist, I don't care what he's training in, any day in the week. Why? Because his training is specifically geared to the fact that he's going to get hit. I know of no other martial art. There may be some that I just don't know of, but I don't know of any, where the amount, the rate, the ratio of your techniques is based not on you blocking or slipping a punch, but on actually getting hit. Some of the best boxing techniques are based on what happens after you get hit. He hits me here. So that means he hit me here with his left hand, so his rib cage is open. So he hits me, boom, I hit him. Some of the best fighters, Floyd Mayweather and so forth, are counterpunchers. That don't mean they don't get hit. Counterpunching don't mean you don't get hit. Counterpunching means you hit me once, I hit you 3 times. You hit me twice, I hit you 4 times. So after a while, even though if the damage is not great, you kind of start trying to reorganize your strategy because you're getting hit 2 or 3 times to your 1. But that only comes because the counter puncher has trained to get hit and still respond. Now that kind of combat training doesn't come in that heavy in the first 3 to 6 months of a karate, even traditional practitioners' training. However, if you're training traditionally, by the end of the year, you should have got kicked and punched quite a bit. You shouldn't be blinking when a punch comes at you. You shouldn't be blinking when you throw a punch. Record yourself if you're a martial artist. Break a board, but have your video camera looking at your face when you break a board and see if you actually blink when you hit the board. Most people do. I seen a video many, many years ago that showed that black belts, so-called masters, actually close their eyes at the point of impact, particularly when they're getting hit and even when they throw their punch. There's a flinch. Watch boxers when they fight. Their jaw can be distorted. Their eyes are wide open. They saw that punch coming. Because they know the punch that hurts the most is the one you don't see. In fact, that is an axiom in Shaolin Temple philosophy. If you read enough, you'll find that they get back to breathing too, but they say that true punching is invisible. I mean, if you're doing it right, the person shouldn't see it. The other thing they say is, this is Shaolin Temple philosophy. If you to know power, you must know air. Which means what? You have to learn how to breathe. So that when you hear people say, oh, your karate won't serve you in a real street fight because your heart will start racing, then that means you never learned your karate training. Why is your heart racing? That's why it's movies, so it may not look that Hollywood, but the sign of somebody demonstrating martial arts, a guy pulls out weapons and the guy doesn't flinch. And the guy swings a sword at him. He goes, ah! He goes. Shoo. Why? Because that's the concept of what you're training for. That's not just that because you know this, you're automatically, oh, I know how to fight, so I'm not going to be upset. No, your training is to learn how to control your breathing. First, you learn it in a calm environment. First, you understand what does it feel like to control your breathing. Sanshin. Half breaths, long breaths. Lock. Release. That's not for effect. There's nobody there watching that when you're training. There's no cameras. Right? For me, it's just a freaking sweaty dojo in the South Bronx. That's why I love Morales' viewpoint. Feel that sweat. Good, that's all you get. What you put in, that's what you get. So thank you for your sweat. That's karate. But guess what? Most people ain't built for that. There's an inspirational speaker. I don't see him much anymore, but I don't know what he's doing. Les Brown. And he says, you have to lean into those things in life that you get back what is worth it to you. He said at one point he wanted to play football. And so he's trying out for the squad. And he said, I was athletic. I was pretty good. So now I'm trying out for the squad at this level. I don't know what level he was at, but he was an adult apparently. And at one end, he's going to challenge this guy, and they're going to clash to see who can knock each other down, like, who's got the guts to hit right. He says, so he gets the coach tells me, like, you got to make this in order if you want to be on the squad. That guy's going to take you out. If you want this, you got to go for this. I think that guy was talking about your mama. He's like, what? I want to play ball. He said, well, I don't know what he told the other guy. But he hit me so hard, he said that I knew it wasn't for me. He said, I quit, right? I don't know if he quit in that moment, but he said, that was it for me for football. It wasn't worth it. That's what karate presents to you. Now, a good instructor will bring you along slowly. I remember Morales, and I was a black belt by the time I actually joined up with Morales, but this is just my way of thinking. This is not for likes or credibility or anything. It's just my way of thinking. You have to empty your cup. It's another old school philosophy of Kung Fu, where the student sits down, he's eager, he wants to learn about the Kung Fu master, and then he's talking, I want to learn the kicks, and I want to learn to breathe, and I want to learn the master, blah, blah, and the Kung Fu master's pouring a cup of tea. And he keeps pouring till the teacup flows over. And the student goes, well, master, the tea is flowing over. He said, that's you. If you want to learn from me, you have to empty your cup. Just like if you want me to pour tea into your cup, it has to be empty to get more. You have to sip what's there, and then I can pour more into it. If you want to learn from me, empty your cup. Well, I had learned that lesson long ago. So when I got to Morales, I told him, even though I have this form of training, I don't know Okinawan Goju-Ryu. I'll put on this, a white belt. And he looked at me. He said, you don't have to. He said, I respect your rank, and I know the people, and I've trained with the people. If you would. I said, no, sir, I'm fine with it. I'm not here to prove anything. I don't know this. So I don't want to miss a step from the beginning. I'll put on a white belt. And he nodded. I really love the brother. I think he watched me for a few weeks to see if I was sincere or if I was just going to try to be a big fish in a small pond because I'm a black belt and I'm training with white belts, and then obviously I can outdo them. And when he saw that I was sincere, that there really was no alternative motive, I could see we really didn't connect in terms of respect. And he trained me with the white belts. And if there were techniques or sparring or something that came up that he knew I was more advanced, he said, okay, no, Todd, you go over there with them. But when it was just training, I lined up with the white belts. Eventually, look at that. I made it. I got my stripes. That was a proud day, by the way, when I got my stripes. Anyway, so the point I'm making is, so about a good instructor will bring you along slowly, right? So he was willing to teach me the basics, not like I already knew, right? He would adjust my fists if it wasn't quite right in a kata. He would comment on my breathing. Todd, this is that. If I threw a kick right or a punch right, he had this thing to say, beautiful! Anybody that knows Morales knows that. Beautiful, right? So it made you feel good, like, yeah, I got it, right? And then one day, there was a class, and we were training with some of the younger belts and some new people. And by this now, I might have had my white stripes, or I might have my green belt. And I'm doing my best to get shit right. And they're over there kicking like Taurus, like a chorus line, like no effect, no sloppy, barely being able to stand up. And Morales is in front of them. He's watching them. And he says to them, beautiful! And I'm like, is that just his word? Because if I kick like that, he'd go, ugh. And then I realized what it was. For them, it was beautiful. Because that's the level where they were at. Right? I've seen him hug little kids that were so frustrated they were crying. And he didn't go, this is karate. There's no crying in karate. He said, come here. And he hugged him. He said, it's going to be all right. You'll make it through. Come on, get back in line. You'll be all right. So good instructor will bring you along. But what he would not do, and I trust still will not do, is you don't get this unless you can do it. Now, whether you can execute it in the street, that's going to be within your heart. But you got to be able to do it. If the kick don't look like a kick, no. If the punch doesn't demonstrate the techniques, if the science is not there, no. If you can't do a certain amount of push-ups and a certain amount of sit-ups, you don't get this. He asked me for 3 years while I was brown belt to go out for my black belt test. Well, I was a busy guy. I had a band. I was a mover. So I had things that I was doing, and it kept me out of the dojo. I was there maybe 2-3 times a week. But it's very traditional. So black belt test only comes up once a year. You miss that window, you wait till next year. And I kept missing it. And he's like, Todd, when are you going to go out for your black belt test? So it took 3 years. So people that hadn't trained nearly the years that I had trained had their black belt. I'm still a brown belt. It's not an ego thing for me. I wasn't there to get rank. I was still developing in skill, right, and ability, so I'm fine. But I realized, okay, I need to acknowledge my sensei and, get my rank, and I do want to have that acknowledgement. So finally at a big training camp we call Gaishuku, and we invited some other masters from the Dragon Society. I call their names, Tom Muncie and Rick Moneymaker, and a few other people, which also, to Morales' credit, he had no ego when it came to bringing in people that he thought could teach us something that he couldn't. On the drop of a dime, he'd bring them in and be right there with us learning. He said, I'm never going to be a master, I'm always a student. That was his thing. I'm always a student. But anyway, so in that Gaishuku, I decided to go for my black belt test. And hey, I got it, right? But it was 3 years in the coming, right? So the point is, while he is a good instructor and he will bring you along, encouraging what you can do, he will not say that's okay. Now, there's some students that didn't make it. He never shunned them, never made them feel bad. He just let them know, you can do what you can do. But don't make the mistake of thinking that what you're doing is good enough that it may save you. You're going to have to do something else. Because, see, that would be the equivalent of a ballet instructor telling the ballerina, well, you can't quite do that. And I don't know too many terms, like a plie or whatever. But maybe you can become a ballerina. No, he's going to say, like, you may become a good dancer. It's hard to hear. You may be some ballet companies that you can get in. But until you perfect those moves, you're never going to become a ballerina. That's hard pill to swallow, but that's truth. That's going to be the difference between you going out and auditioning in front of real first-class ballet people and looking stupid. And not, if they're nice people, they won't laugh at you, but you'll feel the humiliation knowing that you're nowhere near these people. And the same is you being told that you're learning karate, but you never learn to breathe or control your breathing. You never learn to relax your heart rate under pressure. You never really learn to be balanced when you kick or balanced when you're punching. And good examples of that, again, is Michael Jai White, another true martial artist. And I would even say a true martial scientist. It's a science. When you watch this man in his videos, you see he's talking about specific body alignment, specific body movement, specific breathing. It's a science. And he has elevated to a point where he truly deserves to be called a martial artist. Because when you look at it, that's what art is, right? Art is communication. Essentially, it's the quality of communication. But what was one artist like a Prince or some guy playing on the street? Prince is playing the same type of guitar. He's playing essentially the same notes, but the way he's playing it, you go, holy shit, jaw drop, as opposed to the guy on the street. Right? I like George Benson. I'm a guitar player, by the way. I like George Benson. And I can play some George Benson. I can play some of the notes. And you hear it and you go, wow, man, good. You sound like Benson. But your jaw don't drop. But you hear Benson play those same notes and you go, man, that's a bad dude. What's the difference? The technical expertise by which he plays the notes, Benson or Prince, or the technical expertise at the way Muhammad Ali or Floyd Mayweather moves against a punch and strikes. The technical expertise of these techniques being delivered gives you an emotional response. That is when you can say it is art. Because you don't have to know painting. You don't have to know poetry. You go into a museum, you're going to see some paintings, you're going to go, oh my God. I don't even know what that's about, but it just pulls me in. What's hitting you first is that master had mastered the basics, the technical expertise to put the paintbrush on the canvas. Then what he wanted to communicate, and the elegant way in which he wanted to communicate it comes through. And that's what makes martial art a martial art. So when you see Michael Jai White, not just in the movies, but in his videos where he's showing training, you're looking at what he's doing, and he's very good at teaching it, but you get like, wow, what am I looking at? You're looking at the technical expertise so well practiced and developed that alone creates an emotional response. That's art. Okay, so my main point is karate works, but it don't work if you don't know how to work it. A .45 is a lethal weapon. Absolutely, hands down, stop most anything. Make a bear think twice. May not stop him, but it make him think twice. Lethal weapon. That don't mean if you never picked up a gun, you can go to a gun shop right now, pick up a .45, get it loaded, and use it. You may get off one shot. The second shot, you probably blow your foot off. There was a tragic accident where some guy took his daughter or something like that to a firing range. Really morbid story. And he gave her an AK-47. And the kickback made it do like this, and it kicked back and blew him away. Killed him. Same thing with karate. You can learn the moves. If you haven't learned to breathe, then not only are you not really going to execute the techniques correctly, but needless to say, of course, if you get in a fight, what training have you had? The sensei that I met through Morales, Morales now is a part of his organization. He merged with a founder of that organization. I don't want to say the name because I think I would get it wrong, but he's a Okinawan Goju-Ryu master from Okinawa. And I'm sorry, I don't remember his name. I maybe have to put it in later or something. I mean no disrespect. I just don't want to pronounce it wrong. Anyway, before he's with him, he was with another legend, true legend, named Taihiro Chinen. And if you study the history of Taihiro Chinen and the history of Okinawan Goju-Ryu, you know that Taihiro Chinen was a little boy running around in the garden when the founder of Okinawan Goju-Ryu was teaching Goju, Miyagi Chojin. That's where you get Mr. Miyagi from the Karate Kid. It's kind of a little cameo on the name because the founder of Okinawan Goju-Ryu actually was named Miyagi Chojin. So Mr. Miyagi, you see the connection. So this gentleman, who was a true master, peace and blessings be upon him, he transitioned. Great martial artist. Great. Trained with him. Had the fortune to train with him through Morales. Thank you again, Henshi. He was a legend in his own time. He was a great martial artist. And to his mention, the reason why I bring him up, we were at a gaishuku, which means we had all these schools, I don't know, hundreds of people come together, train under the same roof. And we were doing choking techniques. So you get with a partner and you're doing choking techniques. And you sit down in an Indian cross-leg position, not yoga, but just cross-leg. And your partner stands behind you and locks you into the classical, sleeper hold type choke, right? And he's going up and down the line watching this. So he says, get your partner to choke you and then use whatever technique you want to get out of the chokehold. So, it's hundreds of people, but he's going down the whole line, right? He gets to me and I push him with him and I grab a finger, pinky lock, get out, turn my shoulder in so my throat's not exposed, little headbutt, whatever, and I get out and he looks and he goes, no. And I'm like, what do you mean no? That was a good technique. And, his English was typically Asian, kind of broken. He's like, no, Todd. He knew my name because it actually was written on my gi. He writes your name on your gi so you can remember. He goes, no, Todd. He goes, let him choke you. I'm like, saying to myself, he just did, right? So he goes again. And soon as, because training under Professor Moses Powell, peace and blessings be upon him, and before he transitioned, we started calling him Dr. Moses. His thing was, you got to move when it's happening. This idea of, somebody grabbing you, then you grab them, and as soon as they grab you, kicking, you're spitting, you're punching, then you go to your lock, right? So as soon as somebody grabs you, you immediately go to your defensive move so that their move is not efficient, and then you do your thing. So I'm trained that way. So as soon as he grabs me, before he can sink in his lock, I'm moving. And we did it about 2 or 3 times. And Tahiro Chinen, Sensei Chinen, goes, no, let him choke you. And then it sinks in. He doesn't want me to try the technique before I'm being choked. Think about it. And I'm like, does he think? He's like, yes. When he seen my eyes, he said, let him choke you. So I had to wait until I feel my wind leaving. I had to wait until I'm now, he said, now, get out. And I had to tap out. It's like, he said, that's what I want. Let him choke you, then try and get out. And I said, uss. That's a whole nother reality. This was in basic training, in hundreds of people training. And that's what I'm talking about. That's karate. So when you hear people say, oh, people attack you, your heart's going to go up. No. Not if you've been trained. Because you know what it's like to be losing your air and then what because you're right. The first thing you get. Now, I trained under Professor Moses, so I had some leg up. It didn't take me long to start reaching for his eyes, even though I had barely no breath in me. Because I had years of training. So even though I'm being choked, I'm not panicking. Because there's a thing that clicks in when you really get trained on the basics. Like I said, like a boxer, like a performer, like a football player, you may have some jitters because there's some uncertainty of what's going down. But once your mind clicks, and Michael Jai White talks about this, once your mind makes the click that I've got to fight for my life, that's a whole nother reality. Particularly if you're a martial artist. It's that click. And so if you're trained, when that click comes in, there's no heart rate that goes up. There's no heavy breathing. Yeah, there may be some, but it's not significant enough that you lose thing. That's why in boxing, they started a rule which saved boxers' lives. That if the boxer is not punching back and he's getting hit with 2 or 3 or 4 shots and there's no return, the ref jumps in. Why? And sometimes the boxers themselves say, oh, you stopped it too soon. So why do they do that? Great rule. You know why? Because the training alone will not let him respond. He could be hurt. He could be out on his feet. Dazed, but he's right there. He's still throwing his hands up and moving. But we don't know if he's really conscious or if he's out on his feet. And sometimes they get it wrong. Sometimes the guy is still conscious. He just couldn't keep up with the punches. He's still fine. And he's like, man, you stopped it too soon. But we don't know whether you're in that zone and you're fine, even though you're getting hit, or if you're just out on your feet and you're getting hit, in which case can lead to death. So we stop the fight. Very good rule. It gets used wrongly sometimes and things, and I'm looking at this thing is over an hour. Jeez, I might have to chop this up. But anyway, so the point is, if you're really trained in karate, then the idea of you being attacked, whether somebody jumps out suddenly, or whether it's a multiple attack, or it's a weapon, that your heart rate goes up and your breathing is erratic, then that means you don't have the training. Because that's the first thing that goes in before you can execute anything. Like I seen this podcast when the woman said, "Who raised you, right? Who trained you?" And that's what I see in these schools. I see none of that. And even the techniques, people can't throw a kick by themselves without falling over. So the whole principle of force hitting an immovable object, if you can't move the object, you're going this way. Right? So that's I took an hour to say this, but it's a lot of it. I'm saying this for myself to put it on record as a wisdom note. And this is one that I think in bits and pieces, because I don't know if people are going to sit for a whole hour and listen to this. Hopefully it was informative enough. And this is just on training. I had notes. I'm going to touch on them. What the hell if my space in terms of gigs or whatever on this thing, if it holds up, then I'm going to go ahead. And like I said, I'll break it up. That was just on training. Haven't even moved into technique yet. Right? So you see these things with, before I go from that, I'm going to go in. Michael Jai White makes this a point in a lot of the videos I saw him about. That click. What is the difference between a real fighter and like these performative people or even a movie guy? There's a click that happens in your mind to let you know you're this is the real shit. And that's what makes you deadly. If you can do that click and how fast you can do that click. Professor Moses, Dr. Moses, peace and blessing be upon him, taught the same thing. In real training, it's always there. He said, where does the fight start? It don't start when the guy's in front of you swinging. It starts across the street when he looks at you. And you look at that guy, you get to, like, what's that guy looking at me? That's the start. Does he keep walking or does he cross the street? If he crossed the street, it's on. Because he's made the decision, I can get this guy. He's calculated, you're worth the risk. Now it's not, he just served, ball's in your court. That look, the ball is in your court. Sensei Morales used to give another example. He said there's this fable story where two masters meet, right? For whatever reason, they decided they have to duke it out. So they meet each other. They stare at each other for a moment, and then they bow to each other. They bow, and they stand up, and one master looks at the other one, he walks away because you got it. What's the moral of the story? They were both at the top of their game, but just the bow alone, that one master knew, I can't fuck with this guy. Just from the proficiency of his body movement, he's like, no, you got it. I'm not even going to, you got it. That's the same thing that Moses is saying, and I think not the same exact thing, but it's that mechanism of intention and honed, professional, diligent, blood, sweat, and tears training on the right thing. That's the other thing. Not just anything. On the right thing, when that clicks, you know it. And if you've been in a fight, And if you've been in dojo long enough, you know it. You're going up against the guys that when you line up on them, you look in their eye and you go, man, this fucking tansy, I got this shit. And you do. And then you've seen the look in that guy and you go, oh shit, this is going to be one of them days. You might win. To say it rocks your confidence, but you know, you look in the guy's eye like, I'm going to have to fight my way out of this one, right? You know when you see it. Because it's not just the eyes. Of course, it's the whole persona. It's the whole energy, right? So I wanted to get that in before I finish talking about training. That's just training. And like I said, training the right thing. I trained for 20 some odd years plus. Easy 25 years I've been doing Japanese Goju, Taikyoko 1 before I understood what the movements actually were. All the movements I was taught, peace and blessings on my senseis, much respect, it was not what they taught me. And that's why it didn't seem to make sense. And that's why you have people shying away from white belt technique, as though because it's white belt technique, it's not going to be as effective as black belt technique. It's only this technique to get to this technique. Bullshit. The techniques at white belt are just as effective as the techniques at black belt. The only difference is you should be able to execute them better at this level. That's the only difference. But the techniques are just as effective. If you truly understood, and I have to make that another video, the movements in what they call the I pattern or the H pattern that's in most karate schools, it's the basic kata number 1. If you really understood those karates, you'd be a devastating fighter, grappler, and all of that. It's all right in that kata. But you think you're blocking, you think that's a low block. You think you're blocking, you turn and you block like you're blocking. You think you're blocking something low. Really? I'll never forget my sensei, Luis Morales, Henshi Luis Morales, took me to a seminar on pressure points and the understanding of kata. And we spent the whole day with hundreds of martial artists going from different senseis. And this one sensei talked about that one kata. He said, how many of you here have been black belt or been training for over 20 years? Most of us raised our hand. He brought up this brother, black guy, short, muscular, and I'm not knocking the brother, and I'm not necessarily the most handsome guy in the world. And beauty is in the eyes of the beholder, but let's just say he didn't look like he was breeded for beauty. I got that from a movie line. Anyway, rugged looking brother, in other words, right? And he said, you look like you've been in a few fights, and he laughed, right? Because he looked like he eats nails. You know, he's one of those guys, you look in his eye and you go, oh, okay, I got to fight my way out of this. And he said, show me basic kata number 1. And the guy looked at him. He said, yeah, show me kata 1. When he did that one block, he said, stop. What does that mean? He said, well, you're blocking a kick, a stick, or something coming low. He said, really? He said, I'm not going to ask you how many fights you've been in, but I'm going to ask you something. If somebody kicked you at that level or swung a stick at you, like, would you do that? He goes, no. He goes, why not? Because they punched me in the face. He goes, exactly. So why would you teach a white belt that? Why would that be the most basic move that you learn? Why would you start out facing in this direction and then end up fighting somebody in this direction in the first kata that you learn? Because that's not what the move means. That's another video. So you have to understand the science and the basics. So just training for 20, 30 years is good, especially if you're getting in those discipline basics. But it's even better if you really understood the science and you really trained at the right thing, right? Same thing. I've been playing guitar for quite a long time. And I got kind of misled in the beginning, so I was mostly self-taught in the beginning. So I got misled. I actually had certain techniques when I first started playing because nobody told me don't play like that now I can barely do because I've trained myself out of being able to do that. Because people say, no, put your fingers like this. Don't do that. Don't tap one like that's not how you play. Play like this. So now tapping, and it becomes kind of hard because I'm so trained into, quote unquote, the correct way of playing, right? So my point is, it's not just how long you train, it's training correctly. That's important. And that goes back to these basics. Understanding what those moves really mean. And understanding that, and this also is very much Henshi Morales' viewpoint. Can you get an exchange? Can you really get a product out of what you're doing? I remember when he moved on to the particular sensei that he's training with now. It was a period where he didn't have someone else above him to teach him, but he was searching. He said, I'm always a student. And the reason why he was is because as good as he was, he knew techniques and he knew what certain things were supposed to be able to do. And he said, Todd, I can't do it. So either I'm doing it wrong or something's being told me that's not correct. Something's not lining up. And that viewpoint of get a result. So if you're training breathing, if you're training strength, if you're training flexibility and you don't have the flexibility, you don't have the strength, you're not mastering your breathing, then search for the right answer. Because the truth is, it really is a science that works. Don't be afraid to ask questions. You should be getting a result. I'm a health kind of guy, right? But I'm that way about people who I'm listening to that's telling me about health. I look at them. I look at their life. And I really don't, I take wisdom wherever I can find it, but I don't get enthusiastic about some unhealthy, out of shape person telling me about health. Like, then how come you're not healthy? And sometimes there's a reason, but ding, the light goes off. Because how come you're not getting a result? You should be result orientated. That's what I'm saying. All right. That's about an hour on just training. And that's because that's where it's at. Because you can layer these various techniques. I look at, and Michael Jai White talks about this. You see Wushu, kick over the head, blah, 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 blah. And they asked him about that. He said, well, that's not so much about fighting as it is not just performance, but body control, right? The ability to control your body at that level. So the concept, and I'm using my words now, not his, is if you can control your body to kick over your head and kick your legs out at the same time, that's not because that's the technique. That's because if I can do that, then certainly I could punch you. If I can go a kick 3 times and spin around and jump in the air and throw another kick, then certainly I can kick you in the groin. That's the idea. Not that that's the real technique. It's the over the top. Right? I watched Tadashi Nakamura break 3, I believe it was 3. I may be exaggerating. Maybe 2. It may be 2. It was at least 2 for sure. I know it was more than 1. Cakes of ice. Each one weighed about 100 pounds. It was about maybe 3 feet high and about, say about 15 inches wide and a foot high. Cake of ice, right? 2 of them, was at least 2. With his shins. Now you can talk about angles, and once you break the first one, the second one will break the third. You can talk about all you want. You pick something that you think you can break with your shins. Pick anything you want. A piece of bamboo, thin piece of bamboo, whatever you want. See what it feels like. Can you break 1 slab of ice that weighs 100 pounds? So what's the point? Is he going to go around kicking poles and ice? No. But if he can break that ice with his shins, then certainly, if he kicks you in your shins, or if he hits you with a leg shot, that low leg shot that hits you on your thigh, with those shins, you think it's going to hurt? You think it's going to slow you up? You think that technique would work for him if somebody jumped out of an alley and lunged a knife in his face and he just managed to grab it and kick him with those shins in his thighs, you think that one technique might work? I do. Coupled with the fact that his heart rate's not going to go up because he's been punched before. His heart rate's going to go up because he's seen things lunged at. He does a technique, matter of fact, where somebody takes a samurai sword and swings it down and he catches it. Now, you can argue the fact that it's choreographed, right? And he catches it. You know, the person would never really cut him. And I would agree that it's somewhat choreographed. But guess what? Before he does that, they take that same samurai and cut a watermelon in half. Like that. So choreographed or not, if he misses, he's fucking cut. Not to mention his hands. I've seen him do it about twice and never seen him get cut. So it may be choreographed, but it takes focus. So again, the ice, the samurai, what is that demonstrating? Not that he's going to go around catching samurai swords, right? Or busting up poles. That's not it. The idea is if he can do it at that, then certainly if he gets in a street fight, he's not going to be, his heart rate's not going to go, if he can, I like this. I want you to see this. This is beautiful, isn't that? That's, where'd it go? Oh, it must have fell. Where's my beautiful black belt? Here it goes. Okay. I like that. That's my Morales black belt. Proud of that. Anyway, if he can do that with the ice or the samurai, then you pull out a club, his heart rate's not going to go up. You pull out a pocket knife, his heart rate's not going up. Choreographed or not, he can catch a fucking samurai that can cut a watermelon in half. Choreographed or not, he can catch it without cutting his hands or missing and getting a ding in his face. His heart rate's not going up when you pull out a pocket knife. 2 or 3 guys jump out and it's just the 2 of them. His heart rate's not going up. You get my point? Okay. So I think I covered that. One of my notes was being able to do it. So karate is not just moves. Karate is like ballet in the sense that if you are truly doing karate, you have to be able to do it. If you really can't stay balanced and kick fast enough and high enough to hit somebody in the face without falling off balance, you can hit a heavy bag and hear it thump, and you're totally balanced. If you can't do that with your breathing centered and your heart rate not going crazy, then you can't do it. So if you can't do it, don't blame karate because you can't do it. Okay? Years of practice. So again, if you're training right, you'll learn to master your body in a short time. When I say short time, I say about a year. But you'd notice a difference in 3 to 6 months. Whether you'll be able to apply it to your fighting, that depends on the individual. Right? But you'll notice a difference if you're getting the result. You should be getting that result. In that course of the period, you should have been in a sparring match where at some point you got hit in the stomach and you realize instead of, you're like, what do you think those techniques are for? What do you think those half breaths are for? What do you think you're training your body how to respond when now you only have a full breath in you, but you're still conscious? It's a science. Okay. Now you do that for, again, that's why there was an unpopularity about karate that commercial karate broke through. It takes years of training. And whether it takes years of training really depends a lot on A, if you're training the right science and you have the right sensei, and you applying yourself. Feel your sweat. What are you putting in? That's what you get out. But even with that, to achieve what you see Hollywood type karate, it usually took years of training. And to the credit of most martial art movies, they show you that. But it blows over because they don't, it's a movie. So the movies are maybe an hour and a half long at the max. Most martial arts movies are not even that long, right? Hour and 15 minutes. So they show you the guy get beat up by the bullies or get beat up or his master get killed. Then he got to go train with his master in the hills or whatever and then develop and come back and take revenge. But the problem is, it's a movie. So his training and his development is usually only about 5 minutes. And they'll flash under the screen 3 years later. 5 years later, now he comes back and he beats up the whole dojo. Now he comes back and he beats up the master. And you forget that it said 5 years later. And you think you can walk out the movie theater and do those techniques right there. The ones that he did 5 years later. You think you can go to a karate dojo and in a year's time, because you can do the kick, you can now get into a fight and beat up multiple attackers. You forget it said 5 years later. But now, if you're spending 5 years and you haven't even mastered your breathing, you haven't learned to calm your heart rate, you haven't learned to take a punch without blinking your eyes, you haven't learned to punch without blinking your eyes, you haven't learned to get choked and be out of wind before you can execute getting out of the chokehold. If you've been training like that for 5 years, then you haven't gotten the results, and 5 years later, you're still not going to be any good. Now, I didn't get a black belt under Fred Miller in Japanese Goju. But when I was training under Fred, every time I told somebody, oh, you take martial arts? I said, well, I'm with Fred Miller right now. Oh, shit. You must know how to fight. Now, that's not to say whether I really do know how to fight or not. I like that to be a mystery. But the fact of the matter is, Fred was known for one thing. If you're going to train in my school, you're going to learn to fight. I don't even know if people know what I think they call it a shiai. I might be getting it wrong. But basically what it is where one school would invite another school to come over, and all they would do all day is fight. And they didn't have safety kick, safety punch, or headgear. Now, to some degree, that wasn't necessarily a good idea because people got hurt. But I tell you what, people knew how to fight. Because you're talking about martial arts, not realistic. Back in the day, as we say, there's a good short video put out by another master. I don't know what degree master he is, but he is a master, probably even a grandmaster. James Davis. Master James Davis, known as Hot Feet James Davis, right? And he put out a video called, I think it's called Bare Knuckles, or, look it up. Look up Bare Knuckles, Master James Davis, something like that, right? And he talks about the time when karate was first coming on the scene, there was no punch, kick, safety equipment. It was full contact. Now, like I said, it wasn't all necessarily a good thing because people got hurt. But the point is, when you ran into somebody that practiced karate back then, you could jump them in the street if you wanted to. You could take your chances in a street fight if you wanted to. But for most karate schools, and particularly like Fred Miller, if you went up against one of their green belts by the time they got a green belt, you're going to know you're in a fight. So it's not just how long you train, but it's how you train. All right? Like I said, it's like ballet. I'm checking off my notes. It's like ballet. Either you can do it or you can't. There is no, you spin or whatever. That's a plie. Yeah, it's a spin. It looks like ballet, but you ask a ballerina teacher or ballerina, like, no, I see what you're trying to do. And that's where martial arts will look at you throw a punch and you're not balanced or a kick or whatever. I see what you're trying to do. But no, that's not karate. That's not karate. That's what my sensei told me. Okay, respect. And that's why it fails. Okay? Quick fix. That's the other thing. Now, there are quick fixes that work. I guarantee you, somebody that has gone through the real training and really understands the science, take a Michael Jai White, even though he emphasizes from videos I've seen and from what I've seen of him, he emphasizes the proper progression to these things. He could take you, because I've seen him do it, by the way, so it's not off, and that's fine from the seat of my pants. I've seen him do it with martial artists who are like MMA fighters. Now, they already have the basics, and they know what it is to fight, but he'll take them in 20 not even 20 minutes, 5 minutes. He'll show them a technique. And they'll go, wow, shit. Right? That they can't defend against. They're like, whoa, I would have got hit with that. But he can teach it to them. So my point is, there are karate techniques, if you really understand the science, that you could take someone that doesn't know karate at all, never stepped foot in a dojo, and you can drill them in 20 minutes and they'll be able to execute it. But you have to know what you're talking about. You'd have to know. Now, the difference is they can physically execute it. Whether they'll have the framework of mind to be able to execute it, that's another thing. And again, back to Michael Jai White, that's probably more important than any technique you'll ever learn. Can you turn on the fact that I got to fight for my life? Sensei Morales used to have a T-shirt that we wore, and it said, everybody has the ability to defend themselves. And we've talked about it. And I don't want to put words in his mouth, but what I glean from it is a lot of it, you can learn the technique, but you have to learn this means my life. If it means your life, just because if you're a fairly, I don't know, task-oriented person, or not even task-oriented, just like aware that this is your life, the things you'll do to survive, eye gouge, bite, kick, scream, grab what's near you, you'll mess somebody up, man. You'll mess somebody up. You ever see a mother go after somebody when they're after their kid? You crazy? That's because that survival thing is a hell of a thing. That's why it's called fight or flight, right? You can use the energy to run, or you can use the energy to fight for your life. Trap a squirrel, trap a rabbit, and watch this little creature, right? So that is something, if you have not trained, doesn't necessarily come naturally. For some people, that does. I know people that have no martial art training that I never would want to get in a fight with, because their survival is they will do anything. And so their mind automatically creates techniques that you may have never thought of, which goes to another part of training, that maybe another thing called the beginner's mind, which if you're a trained person, you have to learn to get back to your beginner's mind. And what do I mean by beginner's mind? Beginner's mind don't know there's rules. Beginner's mind doesn't know you don't follow up a roundhouse with a front kick. They do whatever you see open and they just do it. And so you go to a karate class that has a sufficient amount of sparring, and when you see the white belts sparring, say the brown belts, you'll see white belts hitting them. Why? Because the brown belt is expecting a certain pattern that the white belt has no idea what that is. Now, the brown belt may win the match, but how did that white belt catch him with that? Because he didn't know he wasn't supposed to put that there. It's called beginner's mind. So you have to go back to beginner's mind, right? But so my point, there's a quick fix. You can show people techniques. I've shown my children certain things to get them out of situations. But they still have to have the mind that I must survive, because what you can really do to that person is going to be very ugly. It's going to be very ugly. And these are techniques, and I'll just say, I'm not going to say what they are, but I'll say what they do. Number one thing is breath. That's the number one. I don't care how strong you are. I don't care how fierce you are. If you can't breathe, game over. So there's techniques that take away a person's breath in seconds if you're accurate. If you get it a chance 2 or 3 times, it may take minutes, but breath. That's number one. If you learn to attack breath zones, you can learn a quick fix on that. But you still have to have the mentality to execute it. Because the person, when they do it, they're not going to be like, oh, you got me. They're going to be like, you're going to see somebody dying. So you have to have the willingness to do that. And there's no in between. There's no way to do it, so that you don't hurt them. It's just your friend in an argument. No, there's no in between. right? So you have to have that presence of mind. But you can show somebody that. The second thing is neurological arrangements, right? There's certain ways you can hit somebody, trained or not. If you hit that spot accurate enough, lights out. Doesn't matter. I don't care. I don't care who they are. I don't care who they are. You can call it chi. You can call it pressure point. I've seen it 1,000 times. It works. It doesn't matter how good you are. You just have to be accurate. Lights out. The body is just made that way. It just is. The other is structural manipulation, right? So basically, the body's made to bend a certain way. You bend it the way it's not made to bend, and if you do it with the understanding of the science, then you can they won't necessarily kill somebody or knock somebody out, but you will be able to stop them from attacking you. And those are quick fixes that anybody can learn, but it still doesn't train the mind. So you can learn that. And so karate got into a lot of these quick fix things, but they left out the breathing and they left out body control and the focus. And so, of course, you can't execute it. Right? What else did I down here? Compared to ballet, I did that already. Combat karate. When you see signs or things that say this is combat karate, already that's speaking to I'll say an ideology that's not what karate is to begin with. So maybe they're addressing the fact that most karate teachers or schools are not really putting in, and I'm putting back in the combat aspect. So that may be good. But it speaks of, I just really like seeing that. It speaks of a lack of understanding what karate is. Right? Karate techniques don't work. Learn Krav Maga. And it just shows that karate works if you can do it. That's what I tell people. If you can't do it, of course it don't work. It's like a dance move. If you can't do it, of course you look stupid on the dance floor. Because you can't drop and spin on one knee. Or because you can't do ballet. That doesn't mean that ballet isn't real. Or that breakdancing isn't really possible. Show that in the Olympics. I'm not going to call no names, but people got up there and tried to do breakdance, and people's like, what the mother F? That's not breakdancing. It looks stupid. Because the same thing, you think you can just get up there and do the moves because you saw the moves. And people look at old videos of young children in the South Bronx doing moves that some dancers can't do. Because why? Like kids, they trained every freaking day, and they learn from people who can really do it. So karate doesn't work if you can't do it. But yeah, if you can do it, it really works. There are certain sciences that go into the principles of fighting. Is high kicking something that is prescribed? Not generally. Why? For simply most people can't do it. But if you can, you can. I learned something in philosophy. There is truth and there is workability. I used to always just be seeking truth. Truth, truth, truth. And then I learned to add something else, workability. Because sometimes you can learn the truth of something, but for you it's not workable. Case in point, I totally understand Floyd Mayweather's shell, right? The shoulder, the elbow, and come back with the right hand cross. Totally understand it. In the mirror, I can do it. I can't execute it in fighting. It's true that that's effective. It's true that I understand it, but it's not workable for me. So there's truth and workability. So is it totally true that high kicking is not effective? No. It's true if you can't do it, then it's not effective. But if you have the speed, the limitness, and the body agility to kick over your head and hit somebody in the side of their temple, it's an excellent technique. If you can do it. Karate works if you can do it. If you can't control your breathing because you're being attacked, you don't know how. When I hear that, your heart rate's going to go up, I go, well, then fucking you don't know karate. It's like telling a ballerina, well, yeah, you could do that move if you knew how to stand on your toes. But who can stand on their toes? Like, are you a ballerina or not? Right? So, I lost my thought. Right. When I hear people say, like, you're going to lose your breathing is going to increase and you're going to be panicking and your heart rate is going to go up and you're going to be delirious and you're going to be able to deliver these intricate movements. I go, yeah. Like, people used to create other hypotheticals for me like that when I was much younger, teenager, and practicing karate. Well, Todd, especially when I was in my 20s, what if you got caught in an alley? It's late at night. It's 3 o'clock, so there's nobody around to help you. And it's 2 guys with knives, guy with a bike chain, a link chain, and somebody else with a baseball bat. And they're coming at you. What would you do? And you know what used to go through my head? And excuse my French. What the fuck am I doing there? Why the hell am I in an alley at 2 o'clock in the morning? And what have I done that these people are trying to kill me? So it goes into the other philosophy of karate, of how you live your life. If I live my life right, I'll never throw a punch except in the dojo. So what I get out of that, I can scientifically think of ways of movement, but more importantly, what the hell am I doing there? You follow what I'm saying? It's like the true masters of this science, this philosophy, and this art walk amongst you, and you think they're the guy who arranges the flowers. You think they're the little old guy that makes the best Chinese food that you've ever tasted, right? That's the whole point of what was Mr. Miyagi doing when the Karate Kid came to him? He's making bonsai trees. So, but the movies and the sell it try to show you the warrior aspect and not the scholar. Because that sells. Because we all want to be a hero. Nothing wrong with that, I suppose, at some degree. But that's why I gravitated to Henshi Louis Morales. Because he summed it up in that one movement. Feel the back of your gi. Do you feel the sweat? That's all you get out. What you put in. And then he added, as someone who spent time teaching you that and training with you, thank you for your sweat. That was big. Anyway, okay. What else do I have? Karate move schools. Right. So most karate schools I see today, unfortunately, teach karate moves. They don't teach karate. Plain and simple. Full stop. They teach karate moves. It's like learning ballet on YouTube or from some video. You can learn the moves, but if you don't know the exercise, if you don't know how to use the bar, if you don't know what you have to do to develop your muscle flexibility and so forth, then you'll never be a ballerina. So I have spent almost an hour and a half on this. Whew. I'm going to look back and cutting it, but I hope I drove home the point that, on first observation of what we see today with karate and other martial arts being demonstrated and being proven to not be effective, only thing they're proving is that the people who are not able to execute it never learned the basics. They never got the results they were supposed to get before they got that. And even when I got that, just another point to this, the viewpoint of most black belts I know, that doesn't mean that I can kick your ass. That simply means that I know all the techniques in the style that I'm supposed to know if I'm wearing this. Todd, show me Taikyoko 1. Show me Taikyoko 2. Show me San Ching. Show me Sisochin. I should be able to show you that. I should be able to demonstrate it perfectly without falling on my ass. I should be able to do it without being winded. That's all that means. Now, how well I perfect that, that's the ranks. That's degrees. That's the degrees that a black belt gets. 2nd degree, 3rd degree. That should demonstrate ability, not that I know it. This just demonstrates that I know it and I can execute it. Can I do it perfectly in a fight? That's not what this demonstrates. Now, depending on what school you go to, it might. I'd say under Fred Miller, yeah, it means that if you got this, you know how to fight. Fuck that. I would even say under Luis Morales, if you got that, you get jumped, you'll be all right. There's no guarantee. You have to still have the presence of mind, but you can do it. You can definitely do it. Now, some schools you get that, it don't mean nothing. It just means you can dance really well. So this is to give a big up to the science, the philosophy, and the discipline of what we call karate and the martial arts. They are not phony. They work if you can do it. And I think I'm going to end on that note. If you are trained correctly, if you're attacked, if you're in a fight, if your life is threatened, no, your heart rate does not get out of control. Your breathing does not get out of control. Your ability to execute even what seems to be, to the layman's eye, a very fancy technique is easily executed. Do you think a sniper is sweating, running, dripping into his eyes while he's taking a shot from 300 yards away? Do you think his hand is rattling? Do you think a surgeon is sweating when he's doing neurosurgery or he's cutting into somebody's heart? No. When you really know what to do to layer that, that's the whole point. But if you skip over that, then yeah, it don't matter what you can do in a non-threatening situation. It means nothing. You're not going to be able to execute. But if you've trained correctly, even if you didn't learn all the techniques, your presence of mind alone will be like in Pulp Fiction when Samuel Jackson is in the restaurant and the guy pulls a 45 on him and Michael just looks at him. Samuel Jackson just looks at him. He goes, not the reaction you was expecting, was it? Because how many 40 times somebody's pulled a 45 on him? And most people will tell you, if they're street or if they're gangbangers or whatever, why don't they panic when somebody pulls out a gun and goes, motherfucker? Because it's 2 or 3 seconds later and they ain't shot. And they know 9 times out of 10, if somebody intended to shoot you, you just see the flash. If you're still seeing the gun, you know you got a chance. Because this motherfucker didn't shoot. That's the reality. People that intend to shoot you, don't go motherfucker, they go bang. So, I said it many times. I don't know how to end this, but I need to end it. I'm not going to try to end it perfectly or philosophically. Oh, one thing I wanted to say, I think, about even the esoteric movements you see, what we call chi power and all that. And I don't hear a lot of the guys I respect talk about it. And that's fine. It is esoteric. But I'll tell you this too. It's also true. But if you can't do it, lying about it's not going to get you there. Right? I remember my brother telling me about a guy he saw that his sensei was S. Henry Cho. Go look that up, S. Henry Cho. He brought a guy in from Korea, and the demonstration was they shot a bow and arrow. They stood across one end of the stage to the other, like a stage. So I don't know, was that 20, 30 feet? And shot an arrow at him. And this guy blocked the arrows caught it or blocked the arrows. Again, is it choreographed? Yes. But what kind of resolve do you have to be able to choreograph somebody shooting a live arrow at you and you timing it? I've seen with my own eyes, I've felt the movement with my own body, where a guy who was showing us a demonstration on manipulating energy, call it what you want, and he lined up people and he made people in the line move. And I'm looking at it, and the way it's set up so that the guy in front of you is taller than you. So you can't see past the guy in front of you. And you'll see people in the line, this guy might not move and this guy moves. And then he may move a little bit more than him, but they're moving. So when I saw this guy move and this guy not move, but there's about 15 people in the line, and the people that are moving are all moving in the same direction, either going backwards or forwards. And I'm like, that's interesting. Then I stood in the line. And at first I didn't really know that I was feeling it. And then I realized I was doing something. Every now and then I was taking one or two steps to adjust my balance. Kind of like if you're riding on a bus in New York and you don't really have much to hold on to, so you kind of balance yourself. But when the bus stops, you got to move a certain way to get your balance. I found myself doing that. And I said, okay, what if I don't do that? If I didn't do that, sometimes I would lean forward. And sometimes I would lean back. And it was just like I was on a boat that was moving. Real shit. I have myself, only in practice, never did it in a real fight, but demonstrating and learning pressure point techniques. Guy was training with me, another fellow black belt, and I did the technique on him. I'm not even going to bother to go into it because I'm not trying to prove anything. But I locked him up in a certain way, and I just touched him. And it was like I hit him with a stun gun. He jumped and screamed, and I was like, whoa, what happened? He's like, what the fuck? Excuse my French. It's like you shot me with electricity. I'm like, are you serious? We spent the whole rest of the time trying to duplicate it. We never did. But the point is, it is real if you can do it. If you can't do pressure point fighting, you're going to get your ass kicked. If you don't know how to manipulate chi, which does exist, you're going to get your ass kicked. If you can't control your breathing and your heart rate and you get into a fight, you're going to get your ass kicked. If you know karate moves, but you don't understand the basics and you have not trained to the point of results, then it's not going to work. And I'll end with that. Karate is not checkers. It's like ballet. Either you can do it or you can't. And if you can do it, it works. Peace and blessings.